Welcome to the first panel discussion in our series Showbiz at Dice. Um, my name is Arnon Shore. I'm a filmmaker, a screenwriter, and an author. One of the authorial hats that I wear is graphic novelist, kind of recently. So I'm really excited to be talking with several really accomplished and interesting people who are in the graphic novel and comic book world. So just a little bit of background about this series and what we're doing and who we are and all that before we dive in. Um, this is the first installment in a series that I'm putting together with Michelle Miller. We are doing this in conjunction with the Brandeis Arts Network, and the series is a bunch of panel discussions with professionals in the entertainment world, alumni of Brandeis University, who have excelled in various specific fields in film and television and theater and graphic novels, etc. Mark your calendars while you can. February 23rd is our next installment where we will be speaking with some executives in film and television. We've got some really interesting people lined up. You'll see emails about that as the weeks get closer. That's February 23rd, same time, 4 o'clock in the West, 7 in the East. So as I mentioned, this is being put together under the auspices of the Brandeis Arts Network. I apologize for reading off of a page. There's some stuff here I want to make sure I get right. The Brandeis Arts Network is a group exclusive to Brandeis undergraduate and graduate alumni that enables anyone involved in the arts, both professionals and enthusiasts alike, to engage, share, and experience the vast array of artistic endeavors of fellow Brandeisians on campus, across the country, and abroad. The Brandeis Arts Network also encompasses and supports the efforts of the Performing Arts Network and the Brandeis alumni in film and television. Now, all of these groups, Brandeis Arts Network, Performing Arts Network, and Brandeis alumni in film and television, are active on Facebook. So feel free to check them out there, check us out there. Now, before we dive in, we do have a couple of little survey questions to find out a little bit more about who's watching and who we're talking to here. So if Courtney will post the first of those, there you go. Just you'll see it pop up on the screen. Tell us a little bit about why you're here, so we can tailor our responses a little bit to who you are and what might interest you. It looks like we've got a bunch of people who are interested in growing careers in graphic novels and comics, which is awesome. A few people who are looking to start careers in comics and graphic novels. In a few seconds, I'll let this run for a full minute, and then we'll end the poll, and we'll ask the next question in the series. Just a little bit about the procedure for today. We've got four panelists, and we'll introduce them shortly. I will ask them a few questions. And we've got the second question on the poll up right now. I'm going to ask them a few questions, not too many. My goal is to try to spark some conversation between these folks. They're all very interesting and opinionated people. So let's see if we can get them all opining at each other to our benefit. At the end, we are going to have a Q&A. So if you have questions for our panelists, or for me, but they're more interesting, we have in the chat, you can post those questions in the chat. Michelle Miller is going to be moderating those questions and following along and making sure that if there are a bunch of people asking the same question, that it only gets asked once, things like that. That's going to be at the very end, the last 10-15 minutes, we'll do Q&A. Okay, it looks like we are talking mostly to Brandeis alumni or current students. We've got some Brandeis faculty or staff, which is really exciting. An honor to have you guys here. And some family and friends too, which is great. I'm going to end the poll right now. There we go. We see the results. I think everybody can see the results now. All right, so we're talking to Brandeis alumni, and a bunch of people looking to begin careers or advance their careers in comics and graphic novels. Okay, let's move forward with our panelists. We are right on time. Hooray! Our panelists are in no particular order: David Pupos, Jody Wynn, Jonathan Lang, and Elliot Magan. Elliot S. Magan. Why don't we have you guys introduce yourselves? Let's start with Elliot and go chronologically from there. Elliot, who are you? What do you do? What have you done?
I was a member of the class of 1972. I guess I still am. We were about the first class who were younger than the university. When I was a junior at Brandeis, I sold a term paper to DC Comics. It was a Green Arrow story. It was, I used to deviate from assignments a lot, but I got a B+ on it, and I thought I deserved an A. So I sent it to the publisher at DC, and he gave it to the editor of Superman, and he gave it to the artist of Green Arrow, and he came back the next morning and said, if you buy this, I'll draw it. So that's how I got in. That was good for 30 years. I wrote Superman for 15 of those years, and pretty much that was the reason I stayed in the field, because I liked Superman. Wrote a bunch of graphic novels, writing some novels now. Wrote my first book in 1979. It was a tie-in with the first Superman movie ever. I wrote 2 bestsellers when I was in my 20s. I've been trying to duplicate that trick ever since. So I'll let you know.
Well, between the A that you wanted on the term paper, the B that you got, the D and the C in DC Comics, you almost ran the gamut.
I got a good start on that.
Fantastic. Thank you, Elliot. All right, let's see who's next. Jonathan.
Hi, I'm Jonathan Lang. I graduated from the class of 98, and my background was in film and TV, and I started with Professor Doherty. I started in comics as sort of an interloper. I didn't really grow up reading comics. My comics were Mad Magazine predominantly and the off issue of Spider-Man. And when I turned 25, I read a book called Black Hole, which sort of opened up what was possible with the medium. And from there, once I saw what was possible, I became very, very interested, borderline obsessed with what could happen. Still with an eye towards film and TV, and I began my career actually developing a failed screenplay into what became a very successful comic, which was my first comic, Feeding Ground. And the success I had was sort of unusual because it was the first book that I had written, and it ended up getting optioned by Ed Pressman in 2015. From there, I wrote another book for Boom, Plunder. And most recently, I had a book about Meyer Lansky that came out called Meyer Through Humanoids. I also had the very exciting thing of getting to create a Garbage Pail Kid for IDW. And I had some other assignments with Heavy Metal and Black Mask. So I've kind of run the gamut. And now I'm living in Los Angeles. And while still working in comics, I've transitioned into working in animation as well. So.
Awesome. Thank you, Jonathan. Jody, tell us a bit.
Hi. Yeah. Hi, I'm Jody Wynn. I'm class of 2000. I actually studied sociology and anthropology. I went on to get an architecture degree, and I've used none of them, obviously. Ended up in comics by just, I don't know, luck or serendipity or whatever you call it. And because I had a background in art, was able to apply those skills and kind of done a little bit of everything. I've been an artist assistant. I've modeled for characters. I built 3D models. I colored. And now my main gig is lettering. And I started doing that with this series Lazarus. And I've loved it. Right now I'm working on Edgeworld over at Comixology. I'm working on The Old Guard. We're doing a little spin-off for that. And just finished up the last volume of Black Magic, and we're on break for that. And I don't know, I love it. I'm excited to be here. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
And David.
Yeah. Hi, I'm David Pepos. I'm the Ringo Award nominated writer of books like Spencer and Locke and Going to the Chapel over at Action Lab. The OZ, which just wrapped up its first campaign on Kickstarter in the fall. And my new book, Scout's Honor, over at Aftershock Comics, that just came out this month. And I'm class of 2008. I got my start as a DC Comics intern. I worked on books like Batman and Green Lantern and the Justice League. Before serving over a decade as the reviews editor at the comic industry news site Newsarama. And I'm super thrilled to be here, and excited to get to talk with my fellow alums about the magic of comics.
Thank you. Awesome. All right. So you've all given a little bit of a capsule of where you started from and how you broke in. I love the failure to success stories from Elliot and Jonathan. I do have a question. I want to start with a career-oriented question. There's this idea, I've certainly encountered it in the film industry, that once you get paid for work, you are a professional. That's kind of the line. When you're kind of working for free and not getting paid, you're not a professional yet. Once you get paid, you're a pro. Some of you started to answer this a little bit. So I want to ask this in two parts. And so if you've already answered one part, you can answer the next one. How did you become a professional? And the second part, which I think is very important, is that door, the door that you opened or walked through or muscled through or whatever it is that door still open today? The industries have evolved and changed over the years and very quickly in recent years. Can people do what you did today? Are those options still open, or are there other options that people should pursue to try to break into the industry in various ways? Elliot, you want to take it away?
Sure. I think the answer is no to that last part. The job of a comic book editor has apparently changed. I was an editor for 2 years. I hated the job. And at the time it was evolving into more of a team effort than an actual piece of work that involved initiative. I got in because my editor liked my script. It came out of nowhere, and he wrote me a letter that basically opened up the kingdom for me. And you can't do that anymore. Editors can't do that. The editors have to go through channels, and in order for a writer to get into the field, or an artist, he's generally got to show work outside the field for which he was paid more than he'll ever get as a comic book artist. So I keep being told, once somebody comes up with a peculiar way of getting into the business, the door closes. So that's apparently what happened with me.
Who else
So,
wants to jump in? David.
so Arnon, I was gonna say that it's not being paid to be a professional. I think getting paid again is actually being a professional. In my personal experience, even though I have a number of books, I'm still breaking into the comics industry. And it really is, and it's a tough thing to say, but you really are only as good as your last page. And really, I think the key to breaking in is being an idea machine, okay? If you have one idea, you're not gonna be a pro. You need to consistently generate ideas. You need to have the back pocket idea and an idea beyond that. Because when you have an editor's ear or an artist's ear or anyone's ear, you need to have a slew of ideas and constantly be generating material. So, yeah.
So I have a question for Jody to actually bounce on what Jonathan just said. Jody, a lot of the work that you do, in particular thinking about lettering, you're not coming up with new ideas for new comics. You're coming in at a different point in the process, a different point in the game. So what does breaking in and staying in look like for you, where you don't necessarily have what Jonathan's talking about, where the opportunity to create opportunities for yourself?
I would just say, I mean, how I broke in was I didn't try to. So I don't even know how to explain that. I literally responded to a Craigslist posting of an artist, Michael Lark, at the time was working on Daredevil. And, before he started using computer refs, was using live models. So I was modeling for characters, Dakota North and White Tiger and such. And, um, but very quickly when he looked at my resume, he said, "Wow, you can do a little bit more than this." So, I started building 3D models, working different things, page layouts, Photoshop, so I don't know how you break in, it just happened for me, right? I like Jonathan was saying, I wasn't even really even in comics. I didn't even know who I was working for at the time. I was working with all these amazing people. I had no idea who they were. Um, so I feel blessed for that. I really do. As far as staying in though, I think it's just like any other job, right? You work your butt off and you do a great job. You're reliable, you turn your work in on time, you're friendly, you're just a good person that people want to work with. And I think that's what has been my sort of outlook of, you know, keeping on going with I tend to get asked to go on other projects with the same people. So, just having a good work attitude, good work ethic and having fun. Yeah.
Sounds good. Sounds
Yeah.
good. David, you had a bit more of a, you started with an internship, right?
Yeah, I was gonna say, y'all get paid around here.
No.
No,
You
you
don't
know,
not get paid.
the
Never not get paid.
the thing that I would say is, yeah, I think my time as an intern was certainly very important, and certainly my time as a critic was really important. But I think I subscribe to the Stephen Pressfield theory of being a comics professional, and that the only difference between you being an aspiring professional and being a comics creator is, do you make a comic? Now, sometimes that can mean that you self-publish your comic. Sometimes that means you go on Kickstarter. Sometimes that means you pitch it to any number of the independent publishers or traditional book market. I think the really the only line in the sand is, have you made a comic? And then keep making comics. There are plenty of people who make a great living self-publishing and crowdfunding, and going the indie independent route. And then there are people who do work at publishers like Aftershock or Boom or Black Mask, or Vault, just to name a few. And then you get to sort of what they call the big three: Marvel, DC, Image Comics. Yeah, I feel like for me, my internship was certainly a lot of failure before it was a success. I was pounding on the doors at DC starting my sophomore year, and they did not actually let me in as an intern until about 2 weeks before I graduated.
What year was that, Dave?
2008. So I worked on books like Batman R.I.P., Final Crisis, Green Lantern Secret Origins, and Supergirl Adventures in the 8th grade. And yeah, it's just, that's the thing about any creative industry, but especially comics, is you better learn the taste of failure and know that that doesn't mean that your journey has stopped. I always say, as much as Brandeis was a wonderful experience for me, and it absolutely is, I would not be here if it wasn't, the best experience that I've had breaking into being a comics creator was doing online dating in New York City. You learn very quickly that you got to sort of be grinding and pushing yourself out there over and over and over again, and not taking rejection personally. And I feel like that experience has really kind of made me a better comics creator. Just knowing that while you may think that your career is like playing chess, more often than not, it's actually like playing a game of pinball. The only control you have is how often you hit the bumpers. And so you just want to kind of keep hitting those bumpers as often as you can.
Can I
Awesome.
just
Thank-
can I just
Yes.
quickly add one thing? The
Please.
one thing I can say that's unique about comics, I think more so than any other art, is the bar for connecting to a creator is lower than I think any other medium. And I say that as a good thing, because the accessibility that you have in terms of reaching out to those who work in the field or are currently working in the field. There are so many good people in comics. And I think a lot of people, it's such a shame that conventions are not around right now, because it's so important to go and show up at the party and support people whose work you like. And by that, I don't mean simply buying the book, but talking to these people. Because the thing you need to remember is we've all been on the other side of the table. We've all been fans. And the line is so thin between creator and fan. It's so exciting. And I think that's one of the things I personally love about comics. Is that
Awesome, thank you. I want to roll into the next question, move a little bit from career to craft, and specifically talk about creativity and productivity. And ask you again, sort of a two-part question. You can answer one part or both. When you're up against a deadline, and this is for those of you who have gotten stuff done for companies, for other people, when you're up against a deadline, how do you stay creative? And the other side of that is when the project is your own, nobody's telling you when it's due, how do you stay productive?
Well, it's the old, who was it, Mark Twain, who said, no, I think it was Thomas Edison, inspiration is 2% and perspiration is 98%, something like that. I mean, when I wrote my first story, it took me a month or so. And I was mostly sitting in the student union, the student center, pumping stuff out on a legal pad. After that, I had gradually over the next year, it got to a point where I was turning out a story a week. And that it started feeling mechanical. And people kept telling me I was doing better all the time. And I just don't get it because, I have to get to page 24. It's very important. But I think when you get used to the process, creativity is kind of second nature. It's like the kids who work at Saturday Night Live, they when they do 4 shows in a row, the 4th show is a piece of cake. But after coming off a break of 2 weeks or 3 weeks, it takes a lot to get grinding. Once you're grinding, you're on a roll.
I know for me anyway, when I'm dealing with deadlines for other people, usually the thing that gets me across the finish line is just panic, because you don't want to mess this up. You don't want to tick off your editor. You kind of know, all right, this has to get done in this period of time. And so knowing, all right, like this is my deadline and nothing goes past this. And so you better just make the thing work. Whereas for my own projects, it's just spite. I just, at least in my case, a lot of my ideas are like very far left field. And so a lot of people, when I say a concept like my breakout book, Spencer and Locke, was what if Calvin and Hobbes grew up in Sin City? A lot of people were like, what? And so that pushback just kind of drove me further because it was sort of this, I'll show you kind of mentality. But ultimately, at least in my experience, if I can't find an idea that I'm not like actively dreaming about all the time, that kind of gets like burrowed into my brain, at least for a creator-owned work, it often winds up not being worth the time. We only get a limited amount of time on this planet, and I only have a limited amount of books in me. So I want to make sure that that's the advantage I have doing creator-owned books. I can just do the books that I like. And maybe that's self-indulgent, but that's the beauty of comics is why not put out just stuff you're interested in? And so that's usually kind of how I try to stay productive, emphasis on trying.
I mean, for me personally, I think the question often is, what am I interested in? And oftentimes, whether it be, for my first book, I was really thinking a lot about the problems at the border. And my goal at that time was, how can I put a face to people who are criminalized? How can I create that as my hero? It's really about, I think, staying open to ideas at some level and allowing them to sort of not trying to control them, but allowing sort of connections to form very organically. It requires an act of faith. And I think it's one of these things, when you've done it, you know the idea will form, but you just have to trust that these sort of connections are going to happen. So to go back to Elliot, what you said, writing is a muscle, and those gaps, it does weaken. But when you get into, I think being inactive is as important as being active. And I think that people, part of the creative process is not doing. And I think that's a really important thing to think about.
I got to think
Yeah.
about that. I'm not sure what you mean.
That's okay.
For me, I feel like most of my creative work happens on the sort of the front end before I even start working. So collaborating with my team members when we first start a project, really digging into what they want, what, stylistically what they want, and, doing sample pages, looking at tons of fonts, looking at past work, things like that. So, I do spend a lot of time on the front end kind of getting that established, because when it is go time, because I'm at the end of the line, and deadline was, yesterday. And yeah, it's like, we got to go, and it is hard to be creative. So I try to put a lot of that thought in sort of the beginning of the project, when we're kind of working all the kinks out. And yeah, I mean, you get these moments, but lettering, I don't know, there's been one book where I did a ton of sound effects, right? And that was probably as creative as I could get. Although, getting to work on Wonder Woman, we had some creative things we worked through. And again, though, for me, it's a very collaborative process, a lot of times with the writer, or the artist. And so, yeah. Get it done though.
For sure.
Creativity kind of takes a backseat sometimes.
So, Jody, I'd like to hop on what you just said about collaboration, to segue into the next question that I have, which is about not so much the craft of it, but the art of the work that you and that all the panelists do. Among our panelists here, we have people who originate and people who contribute to other people's original concepts. Either creating the worlds or contributing to worlds and characters that already exist. For each of you, I'd love to hear a bit more about what you love about the specific type of work that you do, whether it's contributing or originating. And what are the challenges? What are your frustrations with it? We can start with Jody, because reverse the order a little bit.
The thing I love about my work is that it's very it's like the unsung hero, right? Like the less you notice my work, the better it's been done. My work is to stay out of the way, and I don't ever want to do anything flashy that's gonna take over the art. I don't want to call attention to what I'm doing. What I want to do is I want to make the story shine. I want it to read well. I want there to be no hiccups, right? So when you go from panel to panel, page to page, it's got to be smooth. And I love that. Like, I love when I see writers read the final product and they go, wow, it's all come together, right? And it's reading perfectly. It's exactly the pacing, everything, and so it's a lot of nuances, right? And it's a lot of staying out of the way and just letting the writer and the artist shine. I'm fine with that. I'm a very shy, introverted person, so I've kind of fallen into that role very well. So I mean, I know there's letters who do these crazy things, but for me, less is more. Readability and just really being a team player is what it's about for me. So yeah.
Letterers are getting credit on the movies now. I mean,
Wow.
I mean,
I haven't gotten a credit, but I'll take the royalties and all that. That's fine with me. Yeah, yeah.
The people who
I
can lettered first episodes of, Wonder Woman or
Right.
Justice League, they're getting
no.
credit as creators.
Yeah, I've been very
get really
fortunate.
pissed
The
about
people
that.
no, don't be. No,
Don't
we
be.
deserve some credit. Come
You
on.
know
No,
what? On Superman versus Batman, I went to see it with this woman I know who's the daughter of Jerry Siegel, who created the character. And at some point, I can't remember the name of the talk show host who got booted. He's interviewing somebody and looks at the camera, very pregnant stare, and says, "Must there be a Superman?" You remember that scene? I don't know.
Yeah.
Nobody. Okay. Well, my first Superman story was called "Must There Be a Superman?" It's a classic story. I mean, like, everybody quotes it, everybody refers to it, and this guy looks at the camera and quotes the name of my story. It was an inside joke,
Right.
but I never got a credit at the end of the damn movie.
Right.
Makes me crazy. Here I am being crazy. Sorry.
I think it speaks to the complexity of the collaborations in comics.
Yeah, right.
Especially when a character has such a long life and so many contributors over decades.
In, ter- in
Especially,
terms of, oh,
Yeah,
go
I keep
ahead.
raising
Go ahead.
my
I'm
hand,
sorry, David.
You know.
I was just going to say, especially now, I think the comics process has become very atomized. Both between sort of the different kind of silos at the big two versus all the independent publishers and the creator-owned publishers. And so, as a result, I feel like we're seeing a bit of a sea change in the way that the whole creative team is being credited now on books. In part because it used to be, years ago that, yeah, it was the Marvel characters and it was the DC characters, and then you'd have the romance or the Western books, or the lurid horror, the EC comics. Whereas now it's sort of all these teams feel very atomized, and in a way that's, I think, a good thing, because you are seeing, for example, you're seeing more credit being given to not just the writer and the artist, but you're seeing the colorists and the letterers, and now we're even seeing like flatters and production artists and designers getting kind of their just credit. And I think it speaks a lot to kind of the shifting expectations of comics. You look at, for example, something like a Chris Claremont book for the 70s, whereas now there's this expectation to be hyper sophisticated, hyper cinematic, extremely detailed, and it almost is like a modern miracle that people are able to get comics out on a monthly basis, let alone bi-monthly, like Jody was doing on Wonder Woman.
Oh, that was a nightmare. Nightmare.
There's all these meetings in between, you got to go to meetings. That's why I don't do it anymore.
It's a lot. It's sort of, it's trying to maneuver an 18-wheeler through the eye of a needle sometimes.
Mhm.
And I know that, especially, that's just talking about creator-owned books. Then when you sort of have to talk about different sort of corporate dictates when it comes to certain characters, like, for example, just saying Wonder Woman, she just had a movie that came out, and figuring out, like, okay, what has to be done? She has this villain in this movie. We should probably do something with this villain in the comics.
Mhm.
It's a huge challenge. And I feel like, for me, the thing that I love most about writing comics, and the thing that perhaps frustrates me the most, it's sort of two sides of the same coin. I love writing stuff and then getting rewarded for it by seeing like amazing artwork. And the thing that I always grapple with is just being patient about it, both in terms of my own speed and that of my collaborators. I have it easy. I can, if I really kind of put pedal to metal, I could write 5 scripts in a month. Whereas any artist I'm working with, if they're lucky, might be able to do 2 projects at once. I know it's physical labor, and I know that they're spending 5-10 times the amount of time that I am. And so that's the thing I always remind myself, is that I've got scripts that are backlogged that aren't drawn yet. And just reminding myself that, like, it will be worth the wait, and thinking about it from the reader experience instead of my own, that they won't care if it took a year for this book to get made. If they like the book and they come back for more, then it's mission accomplished as far as I'm concerned.
Do you know who's drawing a book before you write it now, Dave?
Who?
Do you know who's drawing a book when you're writing the script?
Oh, sorry. It depends on the project. For a lot of my creator-owned work, I've selected my own artists, but My recent book, Scouts Honor, I was working with former Marvel editors on that book. And so I wrote that we didn't even have an artist attached. When I pitched the outline and I wrote the first issue, I think I was probably I think I had started writing issue 2 or maybe even 3 by the time we had an artist on board. And so there was a lot of reverse engineering once we got to the lettering stage. In fact, it's sort of, to talk about it cinematically, they talk about the movie you write, the movie you shoot, and the movie you edit. I think in comics, it's the comic you write, the comic that's drawn, and the comic as it's lettered.
Mhm.
And so for me, that was kind of a big learning curve, was saying, okay, I wrote this script in such a way, but now I have an artist with a very individual style who's tackled it, figuring out, oh, maybe I got to cut some of this dialogue. Maybe I have to rewrite it to fit the artwork.
Please do.
It's I really kind of overdo it in that I put all my pages down in Photoshop and actually try to do a rough lettering pass on my own.
Wow.
Just to make sure that I'm not.
So I've worked with artists who do that, never writers. That's
It's
interesting.
very stressful.
Yeah.
But I think at the end of the day, for me, it's so I don't kill my letters like Jody, but also just make sure like that I'm not overcrowding the artwork. And it's a tough needle to thread. I mean, for every person you've got who's like very terse, you've got like a Brian Bendis or a Chris Claremont who, it's very dialogue heavy. And I think that's an important part of every comic writer's voice, is figuring out how much dialogue is enough or too much.
You ever see an Alan Moore script?
Yeah, they're like telephone books, right?
Yeah. I mean, and they're mostly scene descriptions.
Mm-hmm.
It just goes on and on. Put this leaf in this position in that tree. That sort of thing.
Yep.
I mean, the other thing that that David was kind of alluding to, if I may, is that the writer at some level has to wear multiple hats. And when you are launching a project, the first person you need to sell is an artist. It is very rare when you break into the business that you will be paired. You need to arrive with a creative team. Now, so the first person you're going to sell is the artist, and you must be open, if you are able to work with a brilliant artist, to your story changing and the look of the book changing. And not only be open to it, you must be excited about that, because essentially this is your collaborator. And if I may, the writer is the screenwriter and producer. The director of the film is the artist. The artist brings the story to life, and they are the person who tells the story. And, I have argued with writers about this, and some people have very strong opinions about this, but I believe, in every project I've worked on, they've sort of breathed life into my script and taken it in interesting directions.
So to pick up on that, it very conveniently leads into my next question, which is about where the art goes after you've created it. Certainly if you write and then an artist illustrates and that becomes a whole new interpretation, but we are operating in a world now where an idea for a comic book doesn't end when the comic book ends. We have adaptations to film, to TV, web series, new media, all sorts of options out there, podcasts. So my question about this is, when you're working, how aware are you of the potential, the adaptation potential of the thing you're working on creating? And does that awareness change or affect what you choose to work on or how you choose to work on it?
I will say this: if you are not aware of it, you are not going to be able to sell many, many comic book companies. Because essentially, for some of them, I can't say all of them, but many companies that are tied to larger companies view comics as low stakes IP development. And what essentially that means is they're playing roulette and they're developing multiple properties, and one of these properties are going to hit. So for them, and this is actually very important, if you're creating IP, it doesn't necessarily mean that you will be breaking into film and TV. What it may mean is that your idea is breaking into film or TV. And I think that's a very important thing to recognize. So in thinking about this, the question you should always ask yourself is not necessarily how am I going to tell this story, but why do I want to tell this story in comics? What are my expectations once I've told this story that it's lived through this medium? Because it's an incredible medium, but by no means is it a railroad into Hollywood. And I think that's really important to think about.
Yeah, as somebody who's had a couple of options before, that's, optioning is literally, it's the very first baby step of anything. A lot of
What we used
independent
to call
comics.
it is strip mining the sub-aesthetic. That's pretty good.
Yeah,
Totally.
yeah. And so the thing that I always try to encourage people, because we all live in California, or all from California, all the panelists, at least once a quarter, I get a screenwriter asking me, like, I have this script that's not getting traction. I'd like to make it into a comic. And I usually tell them, do you have 9 months and $15,000? Like, and usually that they say, oh, like, because like Jonathan was saying, there are some publishers that, yeah, they are very focused on the IP. It's sort of, this is sort of the quickest way to get a proof of concept going. But I have found personally, for me, you got to be zen about it. You need to write a comic to make a comic, and you need to write it in the best possible way as a comic. And I find that there are so many, you can see every so often that there's a book that you're like, that feels a little like a Hollywood pitch document. Whereas I have found through my own experience, the thing that really gets people in Hollywood excited is just people liking your book. And so I feel like a good word of mouth, good buzz, that will go a lot further than you'd think. And so there, comics as a medium are they have some things in common with film and television, of course, especially the way that they are written now. But I really encourage people to look at it as something other than storyboarding. There is a rhythm and a flow and a lot of different artistic choices that go into comics. And if, trying to look at it as a springboard just devalues the medium. The best way, so you got to be zen about it. If you really want your stuff to get made into a different medium or to have a wider audience, that's great. That's extra income coming in. That's extra people who are getting to read the book. But if your first priority isn't how am I going to make a good comic, then you probably won't get to take all these other extra steps in the multimedia.
So you're implying that everybody who's doing comics these days is doing it in order to sell a screenplay?
No, I mean, I should clarify, because look, I did not get into comics to sell screenplays. I'm a third generation comics reader, president of the Brandeis Comic Book Club. So like I come by it. I come by it often.
I used to be the Brandeis Comic Book Club.
But
but it is happening.
It is
I
happening.
mean,
Yeah,
almost every book I work on is either optioned or in the process or has been made into something.
And I would actually, I might offer that it's actually a little bit more of the chicken before the egg in this case. I think that's become just a popular pipeline for Hollywood. That Hollywood is constantly looking at the comics industry for new IP versus the other way around.
We have good stuff.
It's not to say that there aren't people who that's sort of their game plan, but sort of what I was trying to put out there is focus on making a comic. Making a good comic should be an end into of itself, and if anything else comes out of it, great. It's more money to make more comics, but I always sort of my hackles go up a little when I sort of hear of people implying that comics are some sort of springboard to some other medium, because I love comics. I grew up with this, and the only way that we're going to keep this industry going is if we kind of keep leaving it all out in the field for the comics themselves.
I actually have the opposite experience from all of this, in that I made a short film that did well enough and was successful enough that it went from film to graphic novel, which is, except in some kind of crass marketing areas, doesn't usually happen. Um, so I think it's going to be interesting to see how this pot gets stirred, because I mean, if I don't know, I'm probably an outlier, but if that sort of thing happens more, it could be, there's going to be more dialogue between the media. Um, Speaking of dialogue, it is time to open things up a little bit and see if our audience has questions. So Michelle, if you would like to let us know what some of the top questions are. What are people asking? What do people
Great.
want to know?
Yeah. Please send me some more. I have a couple already. I also want to plug Arnon's thing that he was telling that was adapted into a graphic novel is a film about Jewish pirates. And we did an event last summer that's available on the Brandeis website. Just want to plug it in. It's a great film. So we screened the film, we talked about it. So I just wanted to say that. Wonderful. Thank you guys for your questions. I'm going to start off with Arun's question. So he wanted to hear more about the process of adapting a failed screenplay into a comic and the writing, rewriting, as well as collaboration that comes with other artists. If anyone wants to touch on it, it's very similar to what we're talking about. So I figured I'd start with that.
So I can speak about my first project, and I think the real process in that instance was trying to find essentially how to tell this story so it could only exist as a comic, even though the idea began as a screenplay. I was very excited about the possibility of the medium down to, you have to think about if you're telling a story as a book, you really need to think about the possibilities of what that book can do from the moment you pick up that book and get very excited about that. You have to, again, and I cannot stress enough how important finding an artist is as your collaborator if you're going to break into the medium. You develop a visual language with them, which becomes a shorthand that allows you to essentially make it something new, right? I mean, if you're going to do that, you have to be excited that this is something different. And it's okay, I think, that comics are new to you. I think it's okay to make that jump, but just be honest about it. Be a student, be humble. The people will be there to school you, but just be honest and open and humble, and you can do it, really.
There's a lot of great resources in terms of learning how to write comics. There are books like Peter David's Writing for Comics. Brian Bendis did
I love that one.
Words for Pictures. Just to name a few that are on my bookshelf right now.
Writing comics the DC way is a great one.
Yeah,
also,
that's another great one.
Who wrote that?
That was I can't believe he recently passed away. I can't believe I forgot the editor's
Ray
name.
Pasco?
No.
It's Denny O'Neil.
Danny O'Neil.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Danny.
Thank you.
Oh,
Yeah.
So my
It's
bookshelf
great.
upstairs.
It's a great book.
But there are other things like there are classes like Comics Experience. Those are online classes that teach just about every different part of the comics creation process. The Kubert School is also doing online classes. But something that I was told by Scott Snyder, who he was the writer on Batman for a long time, and he just said, find a comic you like and reverse engineer it. Literally just kind of write the script panel by panel, line by line, sound effect by sound effect, number it all. And that will kind of help you figure out what the metric and pacing of a comic is. I'm a big fan of guys like Rick Remender, for example. He's very propulsive with his action choreography. And people like Dan Slott, who are really big on the characterization side of things. So being able to kind of look at their work, not just as a critic, but just to even break it down into a metric, that's been really helpful for me in terms of learning how to write the unique language of comics, figuring out how many panels are in a page, how many words can you fit Burt Balloon without drowning out the artwork. It's an ongoing process, and I encourage you, start writing with some shorts. They don't have to be good. You don't have to show them to anybody. You just have to finish and then kind of learn each time that you finish a new short. That's my advice anyway.
I once got a submission from a guy who owned a comic shop. It was a 35-page part one of an 8-part story, a script. And I told him, you're literate, for heaven's sakes, you know where to put the commas, but write a 6-page story with an ending. And he accused me, I started talking to him about structure. I have this whole 4-hour structure routine I do. And he stopped me and accused me of being a Republican. Very simple. I don't think I've spoken to him
Okay.
since.
All right. I have another question for you guys. Okay, so Zachary Southland, we have a current Brandeis student who's interested in getting into graphic novels. So he's a film major, creative writing minor with a general interest in comics who's thinking about writing his own. Would you recommend teaming up with an aspiring comic artist to write something? Would you recommend he just do it on his own, right? First, what would you guys recommend?
Yes. Call
Yeah.
an artist. Find an artist. I always used to find artists at the Kubert School. That's where wherever I needed a new artist, I'd call up Joe Kubert and say, send me somebody. There are kids out there that are starving just to do the work.
Nice, sorry.
My first artist, I did exactly what Elliot was saying. My first artist was a recent graduate from Savannah College of Art and Design. And that was our first book together, was a book called Spencer and Locke. Yeah, you want to find people who are as young and hungry as you are. The one thing that I will say, to be a little contrarian, is you want to make sure, first off, that you can go the distance with this script before you bring anybody else into it. You want to make sure that this script is the thing that you'll that's the hill you want to die on, so to speak. Because again, this is going to be a marathon for you. I know you're a film and creative writing minor. I don't know if you've taken any of the screenwriting classes, but imagine writing a screenplay and then imagine like also art directing a film on top of all that, and self-financing it. And then that's not counting your own publicity and the like. If you feel ready for that, yes. That's my only regret as a comics creator, is that I wish I had started 10 years sooner. I feel like it'll be the hardest job you ever do, but I think it'll be the most worthwhile.
The other thing I'm going to add about finding an artist that I think is really, really important, make sure they're vetted. Make sure that you have some referrals, because I think sometimes people's enthusiasm for the work sometimes supersedes their ability to get it done. I think, obviously, listen, life also happens, right? It is a marathon, and artists occasionally drop out. But I do think it's really, really important, and I had the luxury, I was part of a studio in New York. So all of my artists were references. And, that enthusiastic person you might meet at a convention or even at a school may not simply have the goods yet. And that's the truth, so you really, really have to make sure that that person is vetted and committed and all in on the project, because it's a marriage. Like, I'm not going to lie, when you're committed to a book, it's a marriage. So
I have a funny story about finding an artist. I'm a filmmaker. I knew nothing about the comics world at all. But it turns out the artist I got for my book is somebody I've known for more than a decade. I just had no idea he was an artist. I knew him as the guy who hired me to teach film classes at a summer camp. And it wasn't until a decade later that I happened to see, and this is Josh Edelglass. He's actually on this call. Hi, Josh. I happened to see some work of his that he posted to Facebook just when I was starting to look around for somebody to collaborate with. So I had the benefit of, at least from a personality level, of vetting, pre-vetting my artist for 10 years before we started working together.
I got a less funny story about finding an artist.
Yeah.
Well, it was annoying. I was editing at a startup publishing company in LA when I first came here, and this friend of mine called me up, a very good artist, really successful guy, and he said, "I got these 2 people you should be aware of," and he sends me over samples from these 2 guys, and I happened to be looking for an inker, so I called up one of them and I said, "Let me send you a script." I mean, I figured my friend referred him, right? And the samples were great. And let me send you over a script. And I sent him a 20-page script to ink, and he sent it back to me. It was a piece of crap, I mean, he would do triangular fingers that came to a point. It was just awful. And I told him I wasn't going to pay him for it. I had to hire another inker to do finishes to get rid of his inks and redraw it as if he were doing the pencils too. And he just got on the phone with me and tried to excoriate me. And I said, okay, who did the samples? I said, the girl in the samples looks just like Jenny, Howie's wife, his boss's wife, the guy who referred him. And he said, no, I never met her. I said, okay, so how do you explain that this work is so inadequate? And he said, well, I'm just not good enough to do a whole 20-page story. I said, well, your samples indicated that you were. Clearly, you know, my friend did the samples and sent them to me as a favor to him. It was too much of a favor. It didn't work. So, you know, getting somebody who's vetted doesn't always work. You just have to go with your gut sometimes.
I also have to add one thing, especially now, and as people are looking at artists, sometimes Instagram is a good way that people have sought out. But it's very important to understand that an Instagram image of a character, a branded character, is not panel-to-panel storytelling. And there are some artists out there who draw incredible versions of Wolverine, and you know, you want them to be this thing, but that's not telling a comic book story. That is not a comic book page. So it's very important that you see sequentials, not just character designs.
I love it. Guys, this is great advice to end on. We're at like the couple-minute mark, which is crazy. I want to end it really quickly on twofold. One, how can we support you, right? How can we get your work? How can we follow you? If you could just write some of that down in the chat. We'd love to buy your stuff. We'd love to follow you on Instagram, on social. There we go. We've got one book right at the ready. Excellent. Not my
It's a novel I
closet.
wrote.
Love
It's
it.
work I've written that doesn't involve
End of
people
it.
flying under their own power. So
No, love it. We want to support you. And then second of all, if you're open for people who love it, yes, bring out your books. I love it. Guys, you want to support Brandeis? If you could also put them in like the Facebook groups, we'd love to like get this, you know, out to the community. And additionally, if you're open, the panelists or anyone is open to, you know, maybe mentoring or being open for people to write to them. We do have people who have asked me, how can we get in touch with the panelists? So if that is something you're interested, even just on social media, by email, or if you're not, this is just totally, if you're comfortable, feel free to add that in the chat. I know a couple of you for sure are on Instagram, a couple of you might not be, totally fine. But yeah, how can we support you?
Well, certainly
Elliot's book?
following on social media helps.
Yes. I know Arnon and David are just at their, and Jonathan are just at their names, so it's easy to find. David wrote, you can follow me on Twitter. Oh gosh, he has the whole thing. Great. Yeah. I mean, David, yeah, just fantastic. This really helps. Open to chatting. Yes, love it. Okay, great. I mean, this is fantastic. We want to make sure that we're mindful of everyone's time, including the panelists and including our guests and all of you guys listening. Thank you guys so much. This is fantastic. We want to make this a monthly thing. We have a bunch of other events that we've done, including Arnon's film again, on the website. And we are trying to do this every month. If you have ideas for other panels, feel free to write to us. We're so open to it. We want to do this for you guys. This has been amazing. Thank you guys to our panelists. Thank you to Courtney. She's the person who's behind all of the institutional advancement from Brandeis. Yeah, podcast, Elliot Makes Stuff Up, jodywynn.com. Love it. Thank you guys so much. Arnon, did you want to say something before we go?
Well, just thank you. You covered it. Jody, Jonathan, Elliot, David. It's been a pleasure. And
It's a pleasure.
Thanks for having us.
And thanks for everybody who showed up and listened and asked questions.
looks like
We're doing this for you and you make us feel valuable. So thanks for being an audience.